let's start with South Carolina going to number 3, Texas A&M. A&M's a 19.5-point favorite. The over-under I have for this one is 26. Count them, 26 A&M pressures of Lenore Sellers. That's the most he's faced in a game this season, in his career, really. Will, any idea who that came against?
Was it? It wasn't South Carolina. Let's see. What is the game?
Carolina against South Carolina?
No. Sorry, I meant A&M. I was like flipping the matchups. Gosh, when would they have been 26 pressures? Maybe like last year against Ole Miss?
Not a bad guess. This year against LSU.
Of course, this year against LSU. Yeah, that's the thing. And we joked about it where he ran like 1,000 yards sideways. Yep. That definitely checks out.
65% of his dropbacks that game, he was pressured on. And he only took 3 sacks. Credit Lenore Sellers, man. That's not going to be on the highlight reel probably, but my God. He's taken 6 sacks in 2 of his last 3 games. This year, he has taken 31 sacks, just as many as he had all of last season. He's been pressured on 44.7% of his dropbacks, third most among power conference quarterbacks. And just in case you didn't know, he's facing Texas A&M. Tied with Texas for the FBS lead in sacks per game. We talk about this because it's just such a big part of every game that Sellers plays in. You've got game 1 with a new OC, Mike Furry. You no longer have Mike Shula, so cheers. That's good.
Their new OC's name is Mike Furry.
Receiver in the NFL for a while. He was, kind of a journeyman, undrafted guy who had the most, I think his most significant reps in the NFL were with the Lions. Some of those like kind of frisky teams in the 2000s, if I'm remembering correctly. Yeah, Google that one, Mike Furry. But he's been around for a little bit, and was a receivers coach for this South Carolina team, which TBD on his status there with kind of the lack of development that we've seen at that position. But you're now on the road in front of 108,000 people at Kyle Field. Again, how much will Lenore Sellers look at Marcel Reed's situation and go, man, that would be nice? Will, can we discuss something here that has become a topic of conversation this week?
Sure.
Todd McShay reported that NFL draft people, front office scouts, as well as people in Lenore Sellers' camp, believe that he is best served to spend another year in college. That goes against what I've believed is going to be the case. And while I don't think that he is a finished product yet, I'm not saying that he absolutely should go to the NFL. I think virtually anyone could look at his situation this year and go, well, that's a guy that had an uphill battle, and any NFL situation that he goes into, unless it's the Jets, he's probably not going to be climbing as steep of an uphill battle. That's a fair thing to say.
Yeah, we've kind of talked about this. There's this class of guy where it's like, hey, you got to go to the NFL, but you got to get the heck up out of here. I think that's about where he's at, where, if you were to come back, let's go to somewhere fun. Let's go to somewhere where we're not kind of seeing this. This is a whole new offense. And the reason why I kind of made that face is this is the guy who I was thinking of. This is one of the few guys who has started an NFL game on offense and defense.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's interesting.
Yes, this guy has started a game at free safety and at wide receiver. He was a 1,000-yard receiver for the Lions, and he also played safety for the Browns at the end of his career, played on special teams a little bit. So this is like an NFL trivia question guy. That's why I was like, this guy? So of course him and Beamer are friends. That is like the most Beamer guy of all time. He plays 3 phases of football. So fascinating to see what that offense is going to look like. Hate to say it this way, but it can't look worse. But that being said, gets to say in front, I think it's a great encapsulation of exactly what you're talking about, which is if I was Lenore Sellers, I would start kind of picking up the fake cough about Monday, Tuesday, start getting the raspy voice, get you an excuse to kind of check out a little bit, because again, we can't say enough nice things about York and Cassius Howell, but where you're at in Sellers' career, there's probably not a worse defense that I would like to face here. This is like Will Anderson level run from that guy.
Does he hit a breaking point? Because we've talked about it before. If you see the body language, Lenore Sellers has been, for a guy that's been under fire as much as he has been throughout his career, I think his body language has been really, really good. And he's had such better body language than a lot of other guys who have endured a tough situation with a porous offensive line. And I've just kind of noticed those last few games where he's getting really frustrated with some of these sacks that he's taking and how much he's having to run for his life. And so I bring that up because McShay also reported that Miami is a team that could, for the third consecutive year, be the highest bidder and try and poach Lenora Sellers from South Carolina. Again, that is McShay reporting that there could be some interest there. Besides money, Miami has a lot to sell. It could sell Shannon Dawson, assuming he's still there and he doesn't take another job. They probably will find a way to still have an elite offensive line. They'll spend on skill players to build around Malachi Toney, who looks like he's going to be a star in college football. And hey, Lenore's, you can avoid getting your brains beat in while living in South Beach. You can do all those things, and you can sell a better life to Lenore Sellers than the one that he has lived so far in 2025. And he's been extremely loyal to South Carolina, extremely loyal. And I'm going to need to see real tangible evidence that he could have one foot out the door for me to think that this is going to happen and this is imminent. But keeping him would be no small feat for Shane Beamer after the year that he's endured. And he's going to have to find answers all over the place around Lenore Sellers, probably to be able to sell him on any sort of vision of him coming back to Columbia next year. And selfishly, I want good things for Beamer. I want good things for South Carolina fans listening to this who would hate to have to stomach the idea of maybe their best quarterback in program history walking out that door. Okay, that would be really tough. And South Carolina fans, don't get mad at me for saying this in comparison to like Connor Shaw, Stephen Garcia. We are great respecters of that. But you get what I'm saying. Like, you didn't have these guys coming into the season that were preseason Heisman candidates in the way that Lenore Sellers was being talked about, the first round discussions. Could he be the number one overall pick? All these things. Lenore Sellers had those things, and South Carolina quarterbacks have not had those things. So I also selfishly want to see the best version of Lenore Sellers. And this feels, Miami, like a place where he could get it, just like Carson Beck in his 15.2% of the time that he's been pressured on dropbacks. Will, that's better than any rate in the SEC, including his counterpart in this game, Marcel Reed, who has the second lowest pressure rate at 23.8%. Trinidad Chambliss has the best in terms of, lowest pressure rate in the SEC. So all of those things, like, we need to at least address that this is a real possibility. And if you kind of and I'm guilty of this as well, just kind of putting my head in the sand saying like, he's off to the NFL. There's not really another path for him. This could be an option. And I would be very curious to know how much Lenore Sellers' camp is realistically considering this.
So a ton of info there. Let me start off and say, I think personally, Connor Shaw is probably at this point head and shoulders above him. I think having a couple of years as a starter,
his legacy will be better, especially if Lenore Sellers' legacy ends with a season like this. I agree with that 100%.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of 11-win seasons. So I think that but there's a difference between production and talent. I think that's where we're going here. Is that Sellers could have been your guy, the statue guy that brought the program back, all this different stuff. That's obviously not on pace for right now. Couple of other things. This is not calling South Carolina a poverty program or anything, because you use the Carson Beck example. I think that's a great one, which is that sometimes there can be a breakup like this where both sides win, right? Like, Georgia is much better because they don't have Carson Beck. And so I don't want to say anything as a foregone conclusion, in the way that we're alluding to here. It just feels like, especially at this era in college football, it's almost like a Kyler Murray with the Cardinals, where it's like, you've just been here a while. Feels like you're taking a lot of hits. Feel like we've tried a couple of things. In college football, your window is so much smaller that it's not that 7-8 years. It's shorter. And so, like South Carolina fans, like, you wouldn't want to play for Mike Shula, like, you guys are protesting him, like, you get it. And so I think that it would be hard for me if I'm in Sellers' camp, where you do bring up the point of there's going to be NFL interest no matter what, And so, like, if there was interest for AR-15, I joked about, like, Sellers is the guy that they thought AR-15 was, right? Already, with just last year. And so if he has the option to go to the NFL, then that means that you have to kind of recruit him. You have to woo him to come back and say, hey, this is going to be much more like the Dowell Loggins offense. This is going to be a lot less like what you just saw, and a lot less like Spencer Rattler, who, we talked about, kind of had that reclamation project in South Carolina. I think they did a good enough job there, but he's now lost his job with the Saints. And so you don't want to be, setting your guy up for an extended college tenure where you get to the end of it and it's like, the NFL is too much tape on me. That's a little bit confusing, So I say that to say the dream is always guys stay in college, they ride off into the sunset. We would hope for that here. And to your point, he's been really loyal. I think that's awesome. So I think that basically where Sellers is sitting right now, hopefully he can kind of survive this season, and this matchup is kind of the apex of that, right? Like we're talking about, hopefully he can get out of here with no injuries. Hopefully he can get out of here without, some altercation on the sideline where he's like, to your point about the body language, it's like, hey, I mean, if you're running 1,000 yards without taking a hit in a single game, you're tired. You're frustrated.
Yeah. You're really tired, and you're thinking to yourself, man, why can't you just be normal? The meme. Why can't we just have a normal drop back, a normal drive wherein I don't feel like I have to run for my life? And some would say, well, he's still making mistakes within that. It's kind of hard not to. Okay. And I've noticed that. I would still, I don't really like the AR-15 comp if anybody's making that, just because I think Lenore's is so much more athletic, and I think he's so much more consistently been able to escape pressure in a way that actually moves the chains and is beneficial to his team, as opposed to like the one random splash play.
Oh, and I'm saying like worst case, like they were willing to take that shot on AR-15 who only had bad tape. So that's to me, the floor for Lenore Sellers is that NFL guys love athletic quarterbacks that they can fix,
Yeah, and I think we're trained in college football to think if a guy leaves a program for a better situation, that fan base should feel jaded. And I would totally understand if this played out in the way that Todd McShay is reporting that it at least could, and if this ended up happening, then obviously there's going to be a part of South Carolina fans that are not going to want to root for him at Miami. And I'm not saying that you should feel any specific way, okay? But I am saying that if we're just understanding how important it is for a quarterback to find an ideal situation to be able to take that next step and to be the best version of yourself, then this is something that like you just need to open yourself up to. And I think South Carolina fans get that, and I'm not trying to explain that to them. But anyway, look at that body language in a game like this, in a game that should be really, really challenging for the things in which South Carolina has struggled with. I don't think this game will be close. I think A&M will dominate at home. They're begging you to take the points. Revenge game. People forget that. Revenge game. South Carolina won this game, got off to that unbelievable start. A&M fought back and then, kind of put the foot on the gas. Kind of amazing to think about. Last year in this game, Le'Veon Moss suffers the torn ACL, and I think it really impacted A&M down the stretch in a limited version of Marcel Reed. And this year, you've kind of forgotten that they've been without Le'Veon Moss, and this is another game, and not to diminish his significance, but it's another game in which you could be reminded, like, oh yeah, they're still without their starting running back, like an all SEC guy, and they probably will just keep rolling. They're averaging over 36 points per game against power conference competition this year. They've been remarkable. I can't take the points knowing how lopsided that matchup is with Sellers and that A&M pass rush and just Marcel Reed playing at such a high level this year. So I'm going to take A&M to win this 35-10.
Yeah, I think the comps here are super interesting. I don't want to, roll over this and not talk about A&M, and I'll probably say this again later in the pod, but I almost feel like I wasn't nice enough to Alabama last week, because it was like we talked a lot of Nussmeier, and I think same deal here, right? Like we really just couldn't be nicer to A&M in this matchup, and I think that Marcel Reed is such a good example, like we've talked about, of a guy that is protected by his system in a way, right? That they came in, they said, hey, here are your flaws. We're going to basically we're basically going to elevate the things you do well, and we're going to coach you in a way that improves the things that you struggle with. And it's funny when we have seen, the joke about Jimbo Fisher was that he was this pro style guy who could develop quarterbacks. He had the EJ manuals and stuff. I think that the job that A&M has done developing Marcel Reed is more impressive than anything Jimbo probably did from a QB standpoint, especially at A&M. And so I think if you're Sellers, like you said, you can kind of look across the aisle and go, man, because no one would ever tell you that, especially coming out, especially earlier in their career, that Marcel Reed was a better, more talented quarterback than Lenore Sellers. But what A&M has been able to basically get out of Reed and what South Carolina has been able to do with Sellers are complete opposite ends of the spectrum, to the point where it becomes, okay, what does A&M recruit to now? That's one thing that I've kind of wondered during this A&M run, which is far from over, is what do they do after Marcel Reed? Do they keep going with the mobile quarterback? What's their next guy look like? Is this the Colin Klein system? We talked about Wigman didn't really fit in there. So that being said, I think this is going to be such a tough game, like we kind of talked about for Sellers, going, look how easy it looks for this guy.
Dude, same starting five offensive line this year. You had an A&M team that went into the portal and got two game changers at receiver, an area that South Carolina struggled mightily. And even with that aforementioned injury to Moss, oh, no big deal. Ruben Owens, he's a former 5-star. He's capable of being really, really good too. We have backfield depth. And South Carolina, meanwhile, they didn't even know if their starting running back was going to be playing a week before the start of the season. And you're just looking up and down going, man, there could be a better life. And I for the sake of South Carolina fans, I know we've said this a lot. I hope you don't have those thoughts creep into your head during another game in which Lenora Sellers is taking 6 sacks. He's getting pressured on every other drop back, and it looks like he has absolutely no chance. But I fear that that's going to be the case. By the way, you can't even find action on A&M to make the playoff. That's done. That's off the table. Ole Miss as well, off the table in a lot of places. I saw FanDuel has plus 5,000 for A&M to miss the playoff. But in terms of like, you can't bet money and say like, you can't bet like $100 on A&M to make the playoff and win 5 or something like that. It's just, they're a virtual lock because even at 9-0, Samford, Florida, we do not disrespect Samford. We don't. But they're coming up next week. And then at the very least, they'll be 10-2 with the Notre Dame win, even if they lose to South Carolina, even if they lose to Texas. And people that are talking about A&M kind of having a thin resume because of the fact that their conference foes are combined 8-27 in SEC play this year, they still have the Notre Dame win, and that matters a lot. So anyway, Gamecocks would officially be eliminated from the postseason with a loss. Fire up the Clemson is our bowl game, that narrative.
Oh, yes. Yeah. And really quick, you're saying that you're taking A&M like with the points.
Yeah, 35-10 was my prediction.
Yeah, I'm about right there with you. And the funniest thing ever would be a
laying 2-0 the points, by the way, not with the points.
Right. Yeah,
they're laying points.
And so like the funniest thing ever would be a Shane Beamer 2-0 versus Mike Oko, but don't see it. So yeah, I think we're kind of, I hate to say looking past this game, but this would be one of the most shocking results since we've been on the podcast if South Carolina wins this game.
Agreed.